Hey, it's Benji Cole, son of Al Cole from CBS Radio and host of People of Distinction, the talk that gives an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. Run to our website, peopleofdistinction.org for more info, or you can always email me directly at benji@alcoleenterprises.com. And on the line with us today, we have Sandy Haney League. We're going to be discussing her amazing book, Ash, from the May 18th, 1980 explosion of Mount St. Helens. That's available for purchase through Amazon, barnesandnoble.com, pretty much wherever books are sold, but also check out authorreputationpress.com. And before we go any further, if you haven't figured it out already, Sandy was brought to our network, People of Distinction, by that same publishing company. So for my writers out there listening in, listen and listen closely. If you've just gone through your process, you have completed countless hours, sleepless nights at times, comprising your masterpiece, and now you find yourself in a precarious position because, well, now you need help moving the book you just finished writing. Well, I'm going to give you some fantastic advice. Contact ARP. People, they're one of the best in the business to do it, and this is exactly what they specialize in. So head on over to authorreputationpress.com today and gather all of the ways that their fantastic team is going to help you do just that. And listen, it is an absolute pleasure to have Sandy here on the line. Now, right there in the title, there's no beating around the bush, people. You understand what we're discussing today. This book is a direct account, okay? It's a first-hand view of how her family and those around her dealt with this catastrophic event. It had affected so many people. It's something we learn about in history books, and it is a true pleasure to have Sandy here to give us that first-hand exposure, because this is something that's gripping people, and by the time we've concluded here today, you're going to run to Amazon and Barnes & Noble and purchase your copies, because you're going to realize that this is a book that you want to add to your shelf and share with those around you. And at the end of the day, don't take my word for it. Take Sandy's. It's her book. She's written it. It's her life. She's lived it. And she's going to be able to articulate it much better than I ever could. So sit back and strap in. Sandy, first and foremost, welcome to People of Distinction, and thank you very much for being a guest. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing fine. Thank you.
Absolutely. Sandy, it's a true pleasure. Again, I remember hearing so much about this volcano erupting, but I'll be the first to admit it. I've never actually spoken to someone directly that has had that firsthand experience. So this is a true pleasure and an absolute delight for myself, as I know it is for my listening audience. Now, before we jump into the book and go into the events that, comprise this book, start off by telling our listening audience a little bit more about yourself, please.
I'm a retired first grade teacher. I taught 30 years. Most of that, I was a single mom of 3 kids. Mm-hmm. And it's one of the reasons for this book was to leave a memento for them. As, this is something really significant that happened in their lives. We were right in the middle of it. Mm-hmm. I'm an artist. The first book I wrote, I had somebody else do the illustrations, and then after dealing with that, I was like, no, I can do better. I know I can do better. So when Author Reputation, they sought me out. So when they came after me, I said, well, I'll only go for a republishing if I can do the illustrations this time. Mm-hmm. And, they didn't have a problem with that at all.
Love that. I absolutely love that, Sandy. And a few things that I just want to touch up on quickly. First and foremost, thank you for your work as an educator, right? And I never taught, I taught 4th grade. That was probably the closest that I got to first grades. Although I did sit in on a couple of classes for first graders. And, listen, they're a handful, okay? I thought my 4th graders were a lot. First graders, my goodness, they'll put you through the ringer a little bit. But first, I'd want to thank you for your job as an educator, because even though I had a very small stint in education myself, I taught, again, 4th graders I taught college for a couple of years, but I have a lot of educator friends and family members in my inner circle. And I understand, first and foremost, the amount of work that goes into being an educator, the amount of hats that you have to wear. Because listen, for my educators out there listening in, you get what I'm saying. You may be assigned to teach history or math or whatever the subject is, but on any given day, you're going to need to be a therapist. You're going to need to be a nurse. You're going to need to be a friend. I mean, there's a lot that you're juggling.
Yeah.
And educators don't get nearly enough credit for the amount of work and hats that they have to wear. And also, they damn sure don't get paid enough. So thank you for all of the work that you had put in shaping and molding the minds of future generations. And as an educator, of course, the education doesn't stop. So whether you're in the classroom or not, you're always finding ways to educate, and we truly appreciate it. So welcome again to People of Distinction. Thank you for your work. And Sandy, without further ado, tell us a little bit more about this amazing book.
Well, like I said, it started out as a project in one of my education classes. Mm-hmm. And my professor said, you should try and get that published. Well, so I did try. Nothing happened. It didn't work. So it sat for a while, and I tried, I don't know how many. I can remember in my writing classes, and they talked about rewrites. You never just write something out, and that's it. Rarely does that happen. It's rewrites and rewrites and rewrites. And that's what I did with my book. And I would, take it to family members and go, well, if you're aiming this at kids, you really need to do something a little bit different here or like that. But what really helped me out was my daughter married a Christian writer. And I finally approached him and I said, can you give me any help here? I need a nudge. I need something that's not working. Mm-hmm. I'm not happy where it's at. And I've tried to remember what it was that he said exactly, but what it did was it got my brain to thinking in a certain way and going, that's how I need to approach it. That's the voice I need to use when I'm writing it. And then it was easy after that easier to do it that way.
Yeah. Sandy, follow-up question that I want to go into, and I want to, we're gonna straddle the fence here a little bit because, of course, I want to get more direct insight, but we don't want to give everything away because people you already know, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, AuthorReputationPress.com, you got to purchase your copies. There's no getting around it to fill in all of the gaps. Although I find myself at the edge of the seat really wanting to find a little more about this. Now, again, a volcano eruption is something not a lot of people have ever witnessed or had to deal with, themselves, right? Of course, we've seen it on TV. We can look it up on the internet, and we can see videos that way. But directly dealing with it is an experience and not a lot of people have. So, Sandy, I want to ask you, talk to us a little bit more about the events of that day and how you dealt with it, some of the experiences or thoughts that were running through your mind.
The way it was a beautiful spring day, we were going to go fishing. My daughter had talked to Grandpa. I was at my parents' for the weekend for a couple of days. Mm-hmm. We ended up being stranded there for a couple of weeks. But anyhow, it was going to be a fishing day. So everybody was getting all ready for that and stuff. And while we were eating breakfast, we heard what seemed like a sonic boom. We got that every once in a while because where my parents' house is right in line with where the Air Force or Army or whoever it is play their war games they're about an hour and a half drive away. Yeah. So we would get the sonic boom. So we're going, the kids wanted to know what it was. And it's like, well, that's just a sonic boom, blah, blah, blah. It rattled the windows and whatnot. But anyhow, we were outside doing stuff with loading up the car and stuff. And And you notice the sky. We have clouds coming in, but these were different kind of clouds. The shape was different. I'd never seen clouds that looked like that, and they were dark. And it was weird the way it was, because the clouds were right above us, but yet on the north side, you could still see a strip of daylight, and on the south side, you could still see a strip of daylight. But there's just these huge, dark, like cotton ball shaped clouds. And so we decided, well, we don't know what's going on. Maybe we're just in for some bad weather. So, it's like kids, pick up your toys, blah, blah, blah. We have to get things put away. Where my parents lived, we get really ferocious windstorms. So, everything has to get secured down if we're going to have a storm. And it just kept on getting darker and darker. And pretty soon, we went in to try and get news. And, we're so accustomed to getting news immediately when something is happening, but we weren't getting it.
Yeah.
And now this ash is falling from the sky, or this black stuff, we didn't know what it was falling from the sky. My mom was the one like, you know what? I bet that's the volcano. Because we'd been getting reports about there had been some seismic things going on there, and there was an old guy that lived up there with his 50 cats or whatever, and they were evacuating parts of the mountain, and he wasn't going to go. And he did end up dying that day, probably most of his cats too. So the kids started getting really worried. The street lights were coming on, and it was dark. You couldn't even see your hand in front of your face if you went outside. If you went outside and you came in, you had this stuff all over you, and the kids were getting scared. The oldest one was 5, and my other child was 3, and I was pregnant with the third child at the same time. But that was the scary part for them, and lightning in the clouds. It was the lightning and then the sounds that come from lightning and the darkness. And the kids had just gotten up. It was so confusing for them. It's like, do we have to go to bed now? and actually, for probably 6 months, into 6 months later or whatever, whenever we had a storm, because the kids and I lived in Spokane. So when we had some pretty good storms. And so the kids are wondering, is that the mountain? Is it going to get dark? Are the lights going to come on? It was just something that they had a really hard time wrapping their little brains around at the time. But that was the big thing, was the darkness. For a while, we went out and sat on the porch and just stared at it. You couldn't, trying to absorb it. Then when we started getting news, and the Yakima stations were finally starting to put some news out about Mount St. Helens did erupt. But that news still was really slow in coming in, and probably part of it was transportation was difficult.
Yeah.
We were hearing that if you took your car out in it for any length of time, the crystals in the ash would melt in your car system somehow. And I mean, the police cars and the emergency vehicles went through a lot of vehicles with their engines being ruined.
Thank you very much for everything that you said. People, this sounds like something out of a horror film, right? Something, you must have thought like the world was coming to an end. The closest thing that I've ever experienced to it, as I mentioned before, I currently reside in Los Angeles, so I'm in Southern California. And wildfires are pretty common in this area because of the fact that it doesn't rain very often, so it tends to be very dry, and then, things just get set off that way. So I remember I was living in Pasadena at the time. This is going back maybe 6 years or so, but we had a very, very bad forest fire that it had spread for miles, and they had a difficult time really containing it. And Pasadena, very close to the mountains, and at night you can actually see in the sky. I mean, on the side of the mountains that we were living on, the fires weren't close to us, although at night you can see the sky illuminating in red from behind the mountains. And during the day there was ash filling the air, so wherever you would go, you would get covered in this whenever you would leave. And that is probably my closest experience. But this is something truly catastrophic. I mean, this is something gripping. People, you know where you got to go. I mean, this is something you need to pick up and understand. Like, there's something about true stories that just kick things up a notch, right? To not only experience these things based upon what she's saying, but then to have it seep in and understand that this actually happened. People went through this is just, oh my goodness. I'm telling you, people, this is something on another level. You need to pick it up. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, authorreputationpress.com. Sandy, as we start to close out of this fantastic interview, curiosity for myself here with this next one, but what would you say was a highlight for you in this entire process? Either, maybe not the experience, because then highlight has the wrong connotation. So either a highlight or a surprise throughout this entire process, either the experience, the writing of the book, getting it published. What stood out for you?
Well, gosh, I don't know. It really drug out. Like I was a very busy person between teaching, and I taught Sunday school and raising my 3 kids on my own. The book kind of got put on a shelf and ignored until my daughter got married to this wonderful guy that says, "Hey, why don't you try this?" And that made it all click.
Yeah.
And from there, it's, just going through the whole publishing thing, how many times I read and reread to make sure I had everything, the grammar. And then my son, who is a special ed teacher, takes a look at it and goes, "Oh, this grammar is wrong right here, and you need to have this sentence structured this way." And it's like, oh. So it's been well edited. But it is basically, I wrote it for children. That was my market. That's the illustrations are cartoonish characters, but it's all real. I mean, I put my 2 kids in there, and I used their real names. My parents are in the story. My dad was used as, he was the head electrical engineer for Wanapum Dam, which we were just real close to. And the Red Cross called him and says, "Hey, we heard you got a empty school over there. Can we get in there? We've got some people that are stranded over in Vantage, and we need to get them a place to stay for the night."
Yeah.
It was old people and young people and babies and children, and then Red Cross needed blankets and pillows and stuff. So it was seeing this little community, because where my parents lived, it was 30 houses. They were built for the dam workers, their families and stuff, so that they could keep those people close if it's needed. And anyhow, so just seeing this community working together, and we got on the phone and and called neighbors. Do you have blankets? Do you have pillows you can lend out? And Dad was collecting them and taking them over to the school, and he was walking. It was all within walking distance. Like I said, very small community. Mm-hmm. But just being there and seeing that all happen, and something that I kind of giggle about is that was when we first started wearing masks over our face. Yeah. If you went outside, you put a mask over your face, and since we didn't have surgical masks, they were, cowboy type masks. Yeah. And everybody was doing it because otherwise you would be getting that ash into your lungs and stuff, and they're telling us that was no good at all.
Yeah, of course.
And it was there, being in that area. I mean, we get winds, and the wind would stir it up, but there was a lot of it. We had maybe 2.5 inches of it, and we had to clear the sidewalks and the driveways with snow shovels. Other areas away from us, I mean, we were in a heavily dropped area, and so other areas weren't quite as heavy. But there was another city. That was one of the weird things about the mountain, or the ash fall. Another city about 60 miles from where we were at, they didn't get inches, they got feet. Wow. They got the bulldozers out. And that ash, I've learned that it traveled around the world a couple of times. Yeah, but it was dealing with that ash and dealing with trying to make it an educational experience for my kids. We got out there wasn't an internet then, getting out the encyclopedias and, this is what it says about volcanoes, and these are the different kinds of volcanoes there are, and doing that kind of thing with them too. So
right. I'm telling you, this is something, it's gripping. With each word, I'm about to fall off my chair, okay? Because I'm at the edge of my seat, and I know so many of you are as well. And I could sit here and I could talk to Sandy for hours. I mean, I'm absolutely enthralled. I'm engulfed in everything that she is saying. And I got to remind myself this is not about me. So people, you all know Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Author Reputation Press. I said it before. I'm going to say it again. You got to pick up your copies of Ash from the May 18th, 1980 explosion of Mount St. Helens. Head on over there today, pick up your copies, and you have Sandy Haney League to thank for all of it. This is something impressive, intended for children, but I'm telling you, a lot of my adults out there, you're going to be able to take this book and run with it as well, okay? Because you're just going to get lost in this firsthand account. I'm telling you, it is gripping. Head on over there today, pick up your copies, get lost in it, and you can thank me later. Sandy, this has been a true pleasure, an absolute delight. Thank you once again for being a guest on People of Distinction.
Thank you for having me.